Oh, such a good holiday.
Mari,
Not at all.
Hi.
how are you? We're all masked, those of us in the room together.
Okay.
How are you?
Hi.
I'm good. How are you? It's so good to see you.
You too. I just saw your message and yes, from recording, so we're good to go.
Okay, cool.
Uh,
Am
Yeah.
I visible? Like, is it fine? I can't
Yeah.
tell. Okay.
good. Where,
Hello.
yeah, so this is, as I mentioned, this is food writing,
Okay.
which I've taught for a while. And, part of this class is most everybody who takes this class is a senior, so pretty close to leaving here. And
Mm-hmm.
so part of what we do is talk about like being in the world and working and getting jobs,
Yeah.
doing things and like options for what to do. So anyway, as we were talking last week, and everybody in here, nobody in here, I think, I shouldn't say speak for everybody, but I think for the most part, not everybody's like super interested in like becoming a food writer, but people are interested in different types of writing, including fashion, including business writing, including international reporting. And
Mm-hmm.
so, as I mentioned, I just started thinking about people that we could talk to who have some firsthand experience with and recent experience with getting out into the world and doing interesting things. And so thought immediately of you, and wanted to talk to you about just what you've been up to this past almost 10 years, right?
It has been almost 10 years, which is
Yeah.
insane. But yeah.
And so I gave them a little bit of background about you, but I wonder if you can just start by telling us kind of like what you've been doing since you've left the University of Alabama.
For sure. Well, I just want to say hello to everybody. Hi. My name is Mari, if you haven't already known that. What I've been up to, so a lot, I guess I should say, like in terms of just like employment, I really started really delving into like journalism, and I also work in social media around 2016. So it actually took me a minute to kind of get my footing in the world in terms of like getting a job that, was actually related to my degree. Before that, I worked like, some odd jobs here and there, especially when I moved to New York. And Chip probably remembers, I actually applied to Parsons in New York. It's a fashion college. And he wrote me a recommendation. Thank you so much. And I got in, but I ended up not going, but I still moved to New York. And so I was living in New York, working in and odd jobs. And I was like, wait a minute, what am I doing? Like, I'm here to work in fashion because that's why I moved there. So I actually quit my job, and I had gotten a internship with a stylist. So I did that for a little bit. And that wasn't paid, you guys. And that kind of led me into other styling positions that were paid. And then I got a position in the fashion closet at Interview magazine. I don't know if you guys have heard about that magazine before. It's Andy Warhol's magazine, so he started it. And so I was working in the fashion closet, and then a girl that I knew through Tumblr, actually. I don't know if you guys were like on Tumblr back in the day. Loved it. And so yeah, so I got up with her because she had posted on Tumblr. She was already working in the fashion industry, and she was like, if anyone needs like an internship or anybody's interested in fashion, like write me. So I was like, immediately I wrote her and I was like, this is what I came here to do. So she basically hooked me up. She actually helped me to get that position at Interview magazine. And then it was a fashion week, and someone was looking for a position to be filled at The Cut, which is another fashion publication under New York magazine. And so I ended up getting that position. It was actually for producing, so it wasn't really too much writing other than me creating captions for like their runway section. So they do like a runway section with The Cut during Fashion Week. where they kind of talk about like the styles and what everyone was wearing by designer. So I was doing that. And then while I was there, the now editor-in-chief, Lindsay Peoples Wagner, she was the fashion editor there. And she was like, oh my God, my intern left. Like, would you want to be my intern? I know you're not trying to really still intern. I know you're trying to move up, but like, would you want to be my intern? And I was like, yeah, because for me, it was all about getting experience. And so I became her intern. I started writing at the cut. So I do have some clips from the cut, which was cool. And they gave me like a couple of their columns to do. And they were mainly centered around like low budget fashion and then expensive fashion, kind of like those two extremes. So I did that. And from there, I worked for The Strategist, which was actually new at the time, which is under New York Magazine. And I started doing social media for them because at the cut, they had an Instagram editor, and I saw what she was doing, and I was like, that seems really cool. Like she was doing some writing with that, obviously, like working with Instagram. And so I started kind of delving into social media. And then after that, I worked at Hypebeast, which was actually my first salaried position. So I was the social media associate there for 2 years. And I did a lot for them in terms of like social media writing and copy and things like that. I didn't really do any articles for them. However, I did a lot of copy work in terms of writing social copy for posts. I did a lot of editing for Instagram stories, IGTV editing, and things like that. If you're familiar with Hypebeast, they have a lot of channels. They have a lot of Instagram channels. They have a lot of platforms that they use. And so I was running about like 3 all together by myself, editing social copy, editing social, like Instagram stories and things like that. So my workload was very heavy. And then after that, I decided that I didn't want to work a 9 to 5 anymore. So I quit. And it wasn't because I didn't like working there. It's just because I just really didn't like working in an office per se. It just wasn't for me. So I quit and I started working remotely. And I've been working remotely since. That's been about a year and some change. I think I quit. Yeah, I quit in May of 2019, and here we are. And I'm still working remotely. I just got back from Mexico. I was living there for 7 months and just working remotely. Right now, I work for Rewild, which is a wildlife conservation. So I do their social media as well. So I kind of left the fashion world for a little bit, and now I'm kind of working in like climate change, endangered species, that type of thing. So yeah, that's
That's
short
great.
of it.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious. So I will ask you a few questions, and then I just want to say to everybody, like, jump in. I don't, jump in at any time, everybody.
Yeah.
But I'm curious what you think, because so much has changed, obviously, because of the pandemic. The idea of working remotely is so much more accepted now, and so maybe we don't really know the answer to this yet. But as someone who moved to New York because you wanted to work in a very New York centric industry, fashion, intersection of fashion and journalism, how important do you think it is to kind of be in a place, at least to get started? Like, if you want to be in, say, fashion, is it super important just to move to New York and just be there because you can sort of have opportunities kind of come up because everything is so centered there? Or do you think we're in a place now where remote work is just kind of the way we're going, and being in a specific place is not as important as it used to be?
Right. Well, obviously we don't know what's going to happen, and that's out of our control. However, I think that if you feel a strong pull to move to a place where you feel like it's going to be beneficial for you, then you have to follow it. And that's exactly what I did. And like, if I hadn't have done that, I would have never went to Fashion Week like that. You know what I mean? If you're working in fashion, that's kind of like a lot of people's dream. I know that was my dream, and like I was able to experience that. And if I would have never taken that leap, like I would have, you know what I mean? Like I don't know if I would have ever gone. So it's kind of like, if you don't do those things, if you don't put yourself in the environment, like you don't know, you know, you won't have certain experiences. So that's why I will say, now, do I think that you have to move somewhere, especially if you're going to be like writing or even social media? Like you don't have to, you know, move to fashion capitals of the world or, you know, certain places. But I think it does help in the experience of you being there, because obviously, like for me, I have so much experience at this point that like I don't have to be in New York if I want to write for fashion or work in social media. Like I can be anywhere in the world. Right now I'm in Alabama because that's where I'm from. You know what I mean? And I don't have to be in New York. I haven't lived in New York since 2019. That's when I moved. And I actually moved to Austin and lived there for 6 months. And then I was like, I'm gonna leave the country. You know what I mean? So it's like, if you have that drive and if you know what you're doing and you're confident in yourself, then you can live anywhere in the world and write or do social media or whatever it is that you want to do. Like you don't have to be there, but it's just about the experience that you want for yourself. If you want a certain experience, then you're gonna have to, you know, kind of take that leap of faith and move. And it's not as scary as it seems, to be honest. If I can do it, you guys can do it.
Yeah, well, what about internships? Because it sounds like you had a few that were unpaid and you're doing
Mm-hmm.
work on the side to basically enable yourself to do those internships. Um, can you talk about the value of those experiences? Like, if you had to do it all over again, is that still a good path for somebody who wants to get into a field? If they can't, just if it's like, is it worth those? Because it sounds like you made connections doing those internships that helped you land paid jobs and maybe continue to. So can you just talk a little bit about that internship world and the relative value you see in that?
Yeah, sure. So, first of all, I don't regret it, even though there were times where it was very hard. First of all, when I when I was interning, I was working like two jobs. You know, I was working in retail and interning, and like I said, those first couple of internships, they were not paid. Like when I was working for stylists, at first it wasn't paid, and then as people got to know me, then they started paying me. So sometimes it's, you know, it does pay off to kind of just like not have any money in terms of like they're not paying you at first. And then because like people have to trust you. If they don't know you, they're not going to be like, yeah, sure, we're going to pay you all this money. Like, and we don't know if you can actually do the job. You know what I mean? So it was good in that regard to get the experience. And I had those contacts in my back pocket. Actually, in terms of the interview mag job, I ended up getting that position because I was working on a shoot with a stylist, and the accessories editor at Interview Magazine had previously been her assistant. And when I found that out, the girl that I was also interning with was like, why don't you just ask her to put in a good word for you, because she knows him and she knows you. If I that, you know what I mean? Like, and it sounds crazy, but like that's how it happened. If I wouldn't have been in that position and done the work beforehand, I wouldn't have met her. You know what I mean? Everything, once you, and I know it sounds like cliche, but once you take that leap of faith in the direction that you actually want to go, everything moves out of the way for you and it happens. You know what I mean? There were so many instances where people just showed up for me. And there were times where I didn't ask them to. They just were like, oh, we thought of you. Case in point, this situation right now. You know what I mean? Like, I was never expecting for Chip to be like, hey, would you want to come and like talk to my class? You know what I mean? It just kind of happened. So I think when you show up for yourself, other people show up for you. So in that regard, I don't regret it. I think that it's good to have the experience. Would I do it a different way? I don't think I would. I don't think I would do it a different way. The only way The only difference is like me not quitting my job beforehand because I wasn't getting paid, and then I had to like have, you know, all these other jobs and stuff. So it's like if you have a job or any type of job, just kind of work around it. You know what I mean? Something that I will say in terms of the position that you all are in right now, you're still in school, and with the pandemic happening and people moving towards remote work, it's probably extremely easy for you all to get an internship right now because people are moving towards remote work. You don't have to be anywhere. You know what I mean? Back when I was in college, I graduated in 2012. You know, people really wanted you to be in front of them. They wanted you to be there. You know what I mean? And so right now, I think it's probably really easy or easier for you all to be able to get like a remote internship and everything where you don't have to be in New York and you can be in Alabama or wherever it is that's, you know, economically sound for you all. You know what I mean? But in terms of internships, I think it is extremely important for you to get that experience under your belt, because if you don't have it, it's harder for somebody to kind of trust, you know, that you know what you're doing, basically.
I'm gonna
Yeah.
ask one more question and then I'm gonna shut up.
Okay.
So to that end, to that point of like not being in front of people and not necessarily being in the place where the publication or the company is, you mentioned earlier that you sort of somebody you met through Tumblr sort of turned you onto something else and that sort of set you on a certain path. How, as someone who spends a lot of time, you know, sort of being yourself on social media and having and working in that field and having to manage like accounts, what can you talk about that process? I'm probably the least qualified person to talk about it in this Zoom call because of just my age. But like how do you be with people like online? Like what's your sort of thinking when it comes to meeting people through social media channels and I hate to use the word networking, but like that idea of like getting leads on things through social media. Or
Well, really,
what's worked for you? Maybe it's the better question.
Well, being that I was in New York, and you know, was kind of like, for lack of a better term, networking with people. Case in point, the girl that got me the position, or that helped get me the position at the Cut, I had already made a connection with her as soon as I, you know, realized that like, oh, we're in the same place now. Cause I knew about her before I moved to New York, actually. I've been following her for a long time. And I was like, oh my gosh, she's working in fashion. So when I got there, I made plans with her. We got coffee. We up until the point that I left, we still kept in contact. We would get coffee, you know, every few months and catch up. I think it's really just about being personable and just about being yourself. Like, you know, just like right now, I'm just talking to you guys like I'm your friend. You know what I mean? You don't have to be so stuffy and like formal with people. I think it kind of takes the edge off of like meeting people, you know, when you're just like chill and calm. And, you know, obviously know what you want out of the connection is important too. And I'm not saying to like use people, obviously, but like if you know that you want to, that you have a goal, then you can tell them that. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. And I was very specific with her and just like, this is what I want to do. Also, when you know what you want, it's easier for people to be like, okay, well, I can help you here. And so definitely like have a plan, or sort of like a rough draft of like what you want and where you want to see yourself, because it's easier for people when you go to them for them to be like, okay, well, I can send her to this place or whatever. And that's kind of what happened with me. And so basically like networking my way around and me kind of working in those different places, you know, you just naturally meet people. And so even after I left those places, there would be times where people were like, hey, are you still working in styling? Like, I need somebody to come do this shoot or whatever. And I was like already, well, kind of, you know, past that phase. But luckily for me, I knew other people who were still like kind of being, in those roles. So I was able to now help them and be like, I can't do it, but I know somebody who can. And, I was able to kind of like pass along that assistance that other people gave me. So it's kind of like a revolving door, if that makes sense. So my advice is just to be fearless and reach out to people and, kind of make connections with everyone. I know that it's kind of iffy right now with like meeting people in person. You don't really want to do that, or some people don't. So you could obviously like set up a Zoom call, but yeah, that's basically what I do. I reach out to people reach out to me through LinkedIn, Instagram, and that's it. Just kind of go for it, to be honest.
Anybody have any questions?
I got a question.
Yeah.
So I want to ask about your decision to move to Mexico. Like, what motivated you to do that? Like, what opportunity did you see there, and did it open up opportunities for you to do different types of work? Could you talk a little bit about that?
So it didn't necessarily open up any opportunities in terms of work. There were a few that kind of popped up, namely like there's a group. So I was in Tulum, Mexico, mostly, and there is a group called Black in Tulum, specifically for Black people who would kind of like move abroad and want to meet other Black people and feel safe in a foreign country and everything like that. So I went to an event that they had, and then we were talking to the owner of it, and she was talking about how like she needed help with like running it, and someone in my group was like, oh, well, Mari does social media, like, so we kind of connected over that. Nothing came of that, but you could see how that like would have been an opportunity for me just by having moved there and making that decision. But in terms of me moving there, I really just wanted to get out of America. Like I really was just like, and also I've never been abroad. That was my first time ever being abroad, and I just was like, okay, I'm going. You know what I mean? I got my passport with literally within 2 weeks. Actually, it was less than 2 weeks because people weren't traveling really a lot, so it's easier for me to get it. And I just left. I was already working remotely. Like I was working in my position that I am now, and I've been with the company that I'm with right now for a year, over a year right now. So I don't have to, like, I can be anywhere, you know what I mean? So I was like, I'm moving to Mexico. Also, Mexico is very cheap. I really wanted to go to Hawaii as well, but Hawaii is extremely expensive, So I was like, okay, I'll just go to Mexico. Super cheap. There's already a lot of expats and digital nomads who live in Mexico, Tulum specifically, but they're, everyone's kind of spread out. So I had like a support system. I met so many people, you know what I mean? So it's like those type of experiences that you could have versus if you just were kind of like kicking it in your apartment, working remotely. And that's what I was doing because I was living in Austin, and I was like, I'm bored. You know what I mean? It's just like, okay, well, if I'm going to get paid to work from my computer, like I'm going to be on the beach, and like when I left, it was December. So it's like going from the weather that we have now into like sunny beaches, like I went kayaking in lagoons, like, it's just like, the decisions that you make, they really shape your life. And it's just like, if you are cool with a 9 to 5, that's great. Some people need that structure, but if you feel like that's not what you want, and you want a different experience, it's there for you, So that's why I chose to leave. I was just like, I want to experience this, So yeah.
Jump in anytime, people. I am curious. I'm curious about why you left fashion for more like conservation oriented work. Is that how you would describe it? Conservation oriented?
Yeah, that just kind of happens, to be honest. I was open to doing any type of work just because, and just to be transparent, when I left, they were about to promote me. Like they were about to promote me to a video editor, and I was going to make a lot more money than I was making. But I'm all about my happiness, and so if I'm not happy, I'm not staying anywhere that I'm not happy. Period. So I left, and it just so happens that the type of work that landed in my lap was climate change, and and then once I started working in climate change, the company that I work for right now is called Rewild, and they reached out to me. I didn't apply for the job; they just kind of reached out to me, and that has happened for a long time. Like when I was working at Hy-Vee, like I was getting messages every single day, and I'm not exaggerating, like every week, every day, of people being like, we have this position open. And it's just like, I already have a job, But I also believe in manifestation and being a money magnet and being a positivity magnet. And I think that when you, like I said, when you take your own life into your own hands and you don't let anyone else kind of dictate where you go, things just kind of come to you. You know what I mean? Without you having to really work hard for it. Now, I did work hard and I did do the work, but it's just like once you do all of that, those things just kind of come to you, it's just like, oh, okay, you're doing the work, cool. Like we're going to send you this opportunity and you can just pick your, have your choices. So that's kind of how I landed into it. And I'm cool with it. And there might be a chance for me to get back into fashion. It's not ruled out, but I just kind of go with the flow. If I'm happy with something, then I'm just like, okay, I'm cool. And then if I want to do something different, then I do it. I mean,
yeah. So I was going to ask you about that, like, because, since I've known you, you've been into fashion, and that's been something that you cared deeply about when you applied to fashion to Parsons and then wanted to get into kind of fashion media. Of course, we all, our interests change. We're not like one person with one interest.
Right.
But as someone who was into that and then worked in it for a while, is it different, or how is it different, I guess, to sort of be doing work related around something that's not that thing? Was it a big transition, or was it easy because it's just you're so skilled and sort of confident in the work you do, period, that it's really not that different? The sort of content of what you're doing is not that different, or it is different, but the techniques are not different.
Right. For me, the techniques are not different, and specifically, I work in social media right now, and so once you kind of learn how to strategize socially within a platform, within an algorithm, it's basically all the same thing for me. The only difference is that the topic is different, if that makes sense. So therefore, for me, it's just like, okay, analytically, all this stuff is the same. The only thing I have to do is kind of navigate how to brand, this company or what they talk about, who's our audience, that type of thing. So being that I know how to do that, it's very easy for me to kind of be a chameleon and be able to blend in and kind of work in different areas. And I would say the same thing kind of goes for writing. It's like if you kind of want to move into, like if you're a food writer, but you want to move into fashion, my advice is to see that the structure of writing is all basically similar, but your topic is changing. So all you have to do is just do research around those things, kind of immerse yourself into what people are interested in, what you're interested in, how you can spin this thing, or this topic to work for maybe who you're working for or what you're interested in talking about. Does that make sense? So it hasn't really been too hard of a transition for me in terms of, going from writing for fashion and music and everything else that we were doing at Hy-Vee into like climate change. I've definitely learned some things, with having to do my research, but for the most part, it hasn't really been like a huge challenge. Yeah.
How doomed are we? interpret that question however you want. Okay.
I think what I'll say is that like we can all do things that can help the planet individually. You know, everything else is really out of our control. And I think that like the news and different things will kind of have you feel like you're helpless, you know, but in our individual lives, there are things that we can do and be more conscious of. But in terms of like the infrastructure and things like those things are already set up. You know what I mean? So take that as you will.
Well, I want to go back to the Mexico question that I asked you because I'm curious what I know you had a job when you went and you were doing it remotely, but from just talking to other digital nomads, other expats who were in the area, to what degree is America, to what degree were people still kind of tethered to jobs in America or trying to get work in America? I mean, the sort of model that was around when I was your age was sort of like you go somewhere, like Connor's family lives in Lebanon, and so he's thinking about going back to Lebanon after he graduates with the thinking that like there's a need for here in the United States, publications, media companies for people in that part of the world who can report on it and do writing based from there. And that's sort of what I would think of as like a more traditional model, which is like you're moving somewhere and you're doing work for somebody back in America. To what degree do you think that's still the case? Like just from your time in Mexico, like the people you talked to, were they doing work for American companies? Were they doing other types of work? A combination of all of that? What do you think?
Yeah, pretty much everybody that I met, and not everyone was from America. There were people from England and different things. And sometimes people were students who were just like, on a study abroad program, but they were interning in different places. Like I met a guy who was from the UK and he was, I think he had a job in like Spain or somewhere. Like after he was leaving Mexico, he was going there. So he had set that up through his university. So like, but in terms of like people who had already graduated, who were working, most of the time they have an American job. They're just living abroad. So as long as you're an American citizen, like you can live abroad and still work if you're working remotely. You know what I mean? So I mean, honestly, I found it to be extremely easy. I can't say that I was never worried, but like, excuse me, but obviously like I was alone and I'm a woman. And so, you have to kind of look out for things like that. But in terms of my work, it was pretty solid. Everyone else that I met there, they were also working, from their respective countries. Obviously, like not everyone was from America, but if there were Americans there, yeah, they had, jobs in America and they were just like working abroad. And I mean, there's cafes there and people working from there. They have like hub spots where people can go and like it's quiet. Like they have those built there specifically in Tulum because Tulum is very touristy for Americans. So there were places like that. I particularly stayed in hostels because they're cheap and they're very nice. Like it's not like, like low quality, like they're very nice hostels to stay there. And everyone I met there was pretty much, if they weren't on vacation, they were an expat. And yeah, and some people, they have their own businesses as well. Like if they're not working for people in America, like they have an American business, and so they're working from their computer with that. That's also something that I wanted to mention in terms of kind of with you all going out into the world. You don't have to work for a company. If you want to be a freelance writer and just kind of like source out that way, you can do that. Like you don't have to have a 9 to 5. I know so many people who freelance write and just kind of like hop around to different publications. Now, obviously, like that takes a little bit of networking and for them to get comfortable with you or for you to have just like an extensive amount of experience. That's why I would say like try to get as much experience as you can right now before you graduate, so that people can kind of like pinpoint, where you're at, or kind of like reference you and like have really good references. And like I said, that's how I was able to get a lot of the positions that I had. Even if there were people who were kind of looking out for me, I still had to do the work. I still had to show up. I still had to interview, you know. And so nobody really handed me anything, even if someone was recommending me. So yeah.
In your experience, how willing are people to recommend you? Like, would you say people are kind of like it's hard to get your foot in the door, but once you're in, everyone's really open? Or is it one of those things where people like gatekeep, recommendations?
In my experience, nobody gate kept. And because it was like once I started, like I said, once I started interning and I started with styling. So I wasn't really writing. I was going and doing like returns and picking up clothes from Gucci and every, you know what I mean? Like those type of things, and working on set with models and things like that. And then my first kind of like entrance point into writing was when I was at the Cut and I was interning there. So I was still doing like kind of styling work, helping them on set, but I was also doing writing. And I got that position because I was already in another position with New York Magazine that someone else had, kind of recommended me for. But I still showed up to the interview and things like that. And it's just like, once you're in those positions and you do a good job, people know you. And you wouldn't think that they would be paying attention because maybe they are like doing social media and you're doing fashion writing, but they are paying attention to you. So it's like, once you get in those positions, it's kind of easier for people to kind of see that you know what you're doing, and they definitely recommend you. And even if they're not recommending you, if you go to them and say, hey, I'm interested in what you're doing, asking them questions, being very observant, being very curious, because that's what I did. Because I wasn't working in social media and I really didn't have an interest in it at first. And then when I was at the Cut, a girl named Emily was their Instagram editor. And I was like, wow, like this is actually a position, because I didn't know that that was a thing. And so I was like, okay, well, what do you do? I started asking her questions. And then I met up with the social director and I was like, hey, I'm interested in this. Like, what do you guys do from day to day? This is what I want to do. And I think when you show up and you show people like, hey, I'm interested in what you're doing, they kind of take you under their wing, because if you don't, like, who's going to know? You know what I mean? And then people kind of look out for you and, once you, like, they've got to know you and stuff like that. Yeah. So I haven't really noticed where people kind of hold on to information. Me personally, I'm not going to do that because I think it's pointless. I think that there's opportunity for everybody. And there have been so many people who have come to me and asked me questions, and I don't have to answer those questions, but I want to because I know that I wish that I had someone to tell me the information that I know now. Because when I graduated, nobody was getting paid to do social media for the most part. You know what I mean? Like, first of all, I don't know what curriculum you all are learning or how the curriculum has evolved at UA. We weren't learning social media courses. I was a visual journalism major. I took that track rather than just the regular standard print. And so, we learned how to edit a little bit. We learned how to take photos and, do Photoshop and things like that. But in terms of like an actual social media course or, the way that people receive their news now from social media, like none of that was around. So therefore, I personally don't gatekeep any of this information because you all need to know, what you're getting into and like what your possibilities are so that you don't give up, number one, you know what I mean? And that you're kind of motivated to go for what you want to do. Yeah. So
Thank you. Cool.
You're welcome.
I won't speak for anybody here, but from my perspective, the curriculum has not evolved very much.
Okay, well, yeah, I look back on it, and honestly, everything that I learned specifically about social media and how to write digitally, I learned in my job. And that is not to bash Chip, because he did such a wonderful job teaching us, and I learned a lot in his class. But it's like specifically like the hands-on things, like editing or writing social copy or things like that. It was really hands-on with me, and I learned a lot of what I know from working at Hypebeast, like, because we did so much, you know what I mean? Like, I was working, I think we worked from 9 to 6. Sometimes I would work over, you know, especially if we had an event to go to and covering things like that, which we did very often. And, you know, you just kind of learn from experience. And I think you just kind of have to like jump into it and not be afraid, because you're gonna, you know, if you want to evolve in writing or any type of journalistic aspect, you're gonna have to just kind of be like, okay, you know, let's do it. I may not know exactly what I'm doing, but like I'm gonna learn, and people will be forgiving, definitely, from what I've learned in my experience. Like, people are willing to help, because I know like a lot of people say this, but nobody knows what they're doing. Like, even your managers or people who are higher up, like, you have to realize that they were once in your position, and they probably are learning as well in their own positions. Like, there's always something to learn. And once I kind of saw that and kind of, you know, realized like, oh, like, he's learning just like me, you know what I mean? And so yeah, that's something to kind of take into consideration.
I know we talked, I think I mentioned when we were exchanging emails that we talked recently about pitching stories and sort of emailing editors and sending out clips, resumes, things like that. And from my perspective, you know, I use the word normal, which I realize is kind of meaningless, but you mentioned earlier, like reaching out to people through social media, sort of being chill and just sort of like being calm and not hyperventilating and not like being overexcited, but just to sort of try to come across as like, you know, a relatively like stable, calm person. But Lucy, who is here, mentioned that she, you know, some of the fashion classes she's taken, they've encouraged her to be more, I guess, creative in her projection to the world in terms of resumes and sites and her sort of presence on social media, pitching emails. Can you talk about like just that dynamic of kind of how you come across, how you want to try to come across somebody who's been on both sides of that, you know, receiving queries from people about work stuff and positions and work, and also being on the other end of asking other people about that?
Yeah, for sure. So in terms of emailing and pitching editors, first of all, get their name right, spell their name right, and just have your idea already fleshed out and know exactly what you want to do. It, you know, helps them to see if what you're pitching, you know, kind of goes along with where they are. Because sometimes you can pitch something 1 month and they're like, no, we're not really interested in it. And then it, you know, gets circled back around to where they're ready for it. You know what I mean? In terms of being kind of chill about it, definitely in your email, be a little bit more formal. You know, you kind of want to balance. What I was mentioning before is more so of like, if you're trying to get to know someone personally, then you could, you know, reach out via DM or things like that. But if you're pitching, definitely email them and come along with an idea. Let's see what else. Yeah, kind of like, if you're pitching to The Cut, like maybe mention where your article could fit within what they're already doing. Like, do your research beforehand, versus like, and know which publication your article would be a good fit for. You know, like, you don't want to reach out to pop sugar about like, you know, sneakers for the most part. You know what I mean? Like that would more so be livable on a hype beast or a you know, some type of publication like that. So like know where you fit in and where your article would fit in before you even reach out to people, because like they will probably be annoyed like if you don't, you know what I mean? Because it's like they don't want to have their time wasted, because they get a lot of, like, editors get a lot of emails. I, you know, would get a lot of emails during my time at Hypebeast about just people pitching and everything. And that's like if you're pitching externally. Now, if you're already working at a place and you want to pitch, obviously you could just go to your higher up or email them and say, hey, here's what I want to do. Definitely already come with your ideas together and like definitive, and like, this is what I feel like would work. How do you guys feel about that? I had to pitch so many times, and they encourage you to pitch ideas, you know, while you're working for people. And I think that's how also you get promoted, you know what I mean? Because they feel like, okay, this person cares, they're very interested, they're very creative. Yeah, that's how I would, you know, do it a lot of times. Like I've pitched to people before, and I always make sure that what I'm doing is actually going to fit for them, because I've made the mistake of, you know, just kind of like blindly pitching to people, and they were like, this doesn't really fit for, you know, for us or whatever. So it's like a learning experience. But just so you don't make those mistakes, like definitely reach out that way.
And then what about resumes when you've applied to things? How boring is your resume? How boring looking is your resume?
My resume is not boring because, because first of all, my name is in pink. Thank you very much. And I mean, there's a little bit of flair to it, you know, like a little bit of color and things like that. But for the most part, it's very like bullet pointed a little bit here and there. But I make sure that if you want your resume to stand out, kind of use, you know, like a little bit of a mixture of a little bit of fun font, but like your bullet points of what you've done, make sure that it's, you know, kind of standard. And I can actually share my resume with YouTube, and you can show them at a later point, so you can kind of see like how it's supposed to look or how you would like for yours to look. It has a lot of my fashion details on there. What I do and what I think is important is to make sure that you're concise, everything is grammatically correct, you know, it's all in, if you ended a job, make sure that it's in past tense. If you're at a job, make sure it's in present tense. You know, those are just like minor little things. But for me, I definitely make sure that I talk about my accomplishments during that position, what I brought to the table versus like what we did as a whole. Because like I've worked on social media teams, I worked on different teams, and I talk about what I've done, you know. Like when I was at Hypebeast, I helped get their style Instagram channel to 1 million followers, like different things like that. I think people want to see, because they want to see like, can this person help grow our business? You know, can they help bring attention to it? If you start like a project and it blows up or something like that, you know, you want to talk about those type of things, not just like, I mean, you could talk about your daily duties, but people want to know like, what can you bring to the table, you know? So yeah.
Anybody else? Anybody else have a question?
Do you guys have a question about like fashion per se? Anybody? I know because Chip said someone, you know, was interested in working in fashion. So.
Can you still not wear brown shoes with blue pants?
I don't know about that. I think you can do whatever you want, honestly. I mean, I wear what I like. So, and also, like when I when I was working at Hypebeast, like literally we did whatever we wanted to. Like we wore like sweats to work. You know, it was a very chill environment, which I appreciated. I would be interested to see like where everyone else wants to kind of work, or because like I can probably help you with that too, if anyone else has any interests different from fashion.
I'm not necessarily interested in fashion, but I do really hope to move to New York City one day, or
Okay.
be based in New York City and work internationally. I know that's like a really tall order these days, but
Mhm.
I mean, I feel like it's kind of hard to get your foot in the door. That's why I was asking that earlier. Like sometimes I'm just like, it's overwhelming, you know?
Right. Yeah. I could definitely see how it would be overwhelming. I know like right now in terms of what I've noticed, because even if I'm not working in a specific field, or if I'm not like right now I'm not living in New York, but I can still tell like if people are looking for people, because I frequent LinkedIn. And so like I think that you just kind of have to have your foot on the pulse of things and just really pay attention, like specifically, whatever you feel like you want to work in. Definitely do research, see who's looking for people, and just apply, because you never really know who's going to say yes, basically. And for me, like I used to be afraid and be like, oh no, I'm not qualified for this, but like, yeah, you are. You might not think you are, but you are. So I would just say like, try your hand at everything. If you have an interest, learn about it, and talk to people and make connections. Like even if you're like, say you're working in food, but you want to work in music, you know, obviously do your job in food, but like if you want to work in music, start connecting with, musicians or people who are music editors and things like that, and talk to them, ask questions, tell them what you want to do. Ask them if they're looking for a music editor or things like that. And really just take initiative. For me, what helped me obviously was moving to New York. I think that if that's something that you want to do, just do it. Like I wouldn't say that I really prepared myself to move to New York. The way that I moved there is I applied to Parsons. But the backstory of that is that I had gotten fired from a job that I was working, and simultaneously, because I wasn't happy. I wasn't happy at the job. The people that I was working for, they were not very nice to me. And so I was already kind of like wanting to be out of that. And a friend of mine was like, well, what is it that you actually want to do? And I told him, I was like, well, I would love to move to New York and work in fashion. I would love to go to Parsons. And he was like, okay, you're applying. So I applied. I reached out to Chip. I reached out to my other, my journalism advisor at the time that I was in school. And I had, when I got fired, actually, my friend was like, oh, ask them to, because they were going to give me severance pay. So she was like, ask them to go ahead and give it to you up front so that you can use that to move to New York. And that's exactly what I did. They gave me the money. I had less than $2,000. I took the Greyhound, and my ticket was $119. I still have the receipt. And I shipped all my things. My rent was $400, and I lived at the same place that I lived in Sunset Park. My rent was like $495 or something like that, and I had like 2 other roommates, and lived there for 3 years. So you don't have to do it as readily as I did, but like just to say that like if you feel like, oh my God, I'm gonna be broke or whatever, like it works out. I think when you just take a leap of faith and you go for what you want, it's gonna work. So don't be afraid to move there. I would say try to have a plan. Don't be like me and like just kind of hop into things. But like, that's what I'm saying. Like try to get as much internship experience right now. But if you can't find it right now, still move there. I think it's easier sometimes to get what you need if you're already in that place. You know what I mean? Like as opposed to you being in Texas, you can go up to New York Magazine and talk to people, or you're all like, say you want to work in a specific place, and that that editor lives there, you can have coffee with them. You can't do that if you live somewhere else, and that's kind of how you can get your foot in the door versus like if you live somewhere else. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Anyone else?
Anybody else? Mari, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Been
So
fantastic.
welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was really
A lot.
awesome.
Thank you.
You're
Will you
welcome.
send me your resume to share with them? And if anybody has any questions, would you mind if they reach out to you by email?
Sure. My email is marijohnsonofficial@gmail.com, and I'll send that. Well, you have an email, so you can definitely give it out. My LinkedIn is Mariana Johnson. That's my full name. So if you want to look at my LinkedIn, if you want to copy how my LinkedIn is set up, you can also do that, because that definitely helps you in terms of employment, because that's usually how people reach out to me for things like that. So yeah, I'll send you my resume like right now, and you guys can go over it. And if anyone has any questions after, definitely hit me up. I would love to talk to you. So yeah.
It's great to see you. Thank you.
Thanks, Mari.
Good to see you too. Thank you guys. Bye.
Bye.